While hurricanes have formed in the Atlantic Ocean during every calendar month, June 1st is the official start of hurricane season. In this episode of the WeatherWise podcast, we'll explore the hurricane season month by month. If you'd like to watch a video of this podcast episode instead, we've included that in the show notes. We've also included graphics for you to follow along. I'm Ed Oswald, host of the WeatherWise podcast. I'm glad you could join us. Let's get started. Hurricane season begins in the Atlantic on June 1st and ends on November 30th. Activity begins in the late spring and increases dramatically through mid-September. After this peak, things quiet down in the fall. An Atlantic hurricane season typically has 10 named storms, 6 of which become hurricanes, and 3 of those major hurricanes. That's a storm that reaches Category 3 or higher on the Saffir-Simpson scale. However, activity isn't always confined to hurricane season. For example, every 4 seasons or so, the first named storm occurs in May, and about once a decade a storm develops as late as December. But most hurricane activity occurs between June and November. Now let's take a look at what to expect month by month. We don't look far from the coast for tropical development in June. Development is most likely in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, especially if the waters are warm. These storms often start organizing in the warm waters of the Western Caribbean before pushing northward. Activity is light, with typically a single named storm during June. The effects of the summer sun on water temperatures are apparent in July as more of the tropical Atlantic springs to life. While the Gulf of Mexico remains favorable, storms also commonly form near the Bahamas and in the eastern Caribbean. Storm tracks become longer as more of the Atlantic warms above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, allowing these storms to churn over the open sea and intensify. The western and central portions of the Gulf Coast see an increase in activity, and the southeastern U.S. is now under threat. While much more of the Atlantic can support tropical development, July still remains quiet. Expect an additional named storm during this month, but things are about to change dramatically. Waters are warm enough over a large section of the tropics by August to support development almost anywhere. Storms form farther and farther away from land, giving them more time to gain strength. Long-track storms start to develop. Areas like the mid-Atlantic coast and especially the Outer Banks come under threat. An average August has 2 to 3 named storms. September is even busier. Offshore waters of the mid-Atlantic are now warm enough to support tropical development. The Cape Verde Islands off the West African coast become the area to watch, and there aren't many areas where tropical development can't occur. Typical tracks come in 3 groups. Storms in the Caribbean often head for the western and central Gulf coasts, while Gulf storms typically move northward into Florida and up the East Coast. Long-track storms typically turn out to sea well before land, but must be watched especially if you live on the southeastern mid-Atlantic coast or on Bermuda. The peak of the hurricane season is September 10th, and it's not uncommon to see all of the 3 or 4 named storms that form during the month all churning through the Atlantic at that time. For most, the transition into fall takes the attention off the tropics, but as we've seen in the past, Sandy being the most well-known example, the season's not over yet. While water temperatures are still warm in many places in October, wind shear returns, which is detrimental to tropical development. As a result, most development occurs closer to the coast, often due to old frontal boundaries. Storms in the Western Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico should be watched as they may turn up the coast, becoming strong nor'easters. About 2 named storms will form during an average October. Finally, in November, things quiet down with development limited to the Central Caribbean. Most of these storms will push north and eastward. An average November has a storm about once every other season. But no matter where you live on the East Coast, there is an increased chance for tropical development at some point during the summer or fall. The best thing to do is to keep a watchful eye on the tropics all season long. That's all the time we have for this episode. WeatherWise is a production of the Weather Station experts and the WeatherWise Company. Today's episode was produced by Derek Oswald and myself from our studios here in West Lawn, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to learn more about WeatherWise, please visit our website at weatherwise.show. That's WHYS. On our website, you can listen to this episode and any past episodes and also get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to WeatherWise to get the latest episodes as soon as we release them. You can find those links to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and more on our website as well. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, stay weatherwise.